Hey guys, welcome back to r/Prorevenge. Imagine working somewhere for 2 decades, knowing every system inside and out, and then watching a new boss weaponize your disability to push you out. Now imagine they forgot to revoke your admin access rights to the company's system before firing you. What would you do? Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a fantastic story from r/Prorevenge. So I worked in an office where they promoted a very new, unexperienced, unqualified suck-up from an entry-level guy to a team lead. One of 3 under the manager. There were roughly 30 people on the team. HR rules stated that he was not allowed to apply due to having been at the company less than a year, had 0 leadership experience, etc. Grievances were filed with HR and dropped despite multiple fully qualified individuals with spotless records being in the running. And yeah, the guy was known to be a suck-up and was not really liked prior to his promotion. After the promotion though, he was wildly hated, apart from a couple sycophants. Quite entertaining, in retrospect, how people will degrade themselves for the barest scraps of power. Anyways, middle management knew he was reviled and told him that he had to find a way to get people to like him, and his solution was, not required, but you should think of them as required. Happy hours every month. For the first one, most everyone felt like they had to go and started figuring out how to fit it into their schedule. Some of these people had an hour drive each way and were finding babysitters for their kids. These people were terrified they would lose their jobs if they missed drinking a few beers with the boss. I should note though that he has roped in everyone under the manager. I'm not even technically under this guy. I knew my rights and I declined the invite. He comes by my cube a few times and the day off to try to pressure me into being there. Dude, there's no way I'm spending my free time with work people. You can either keep me on the clock or you cannot ask me to be there. I know my rights. I liked my team members well enough and had been to their parties at their houses, etc., but I'm not going out with the team lead under any circumstances. But of course, team lead did not like that and walked away in a huff. Next day, everyone comes in and everyone is pretending like they had fun when it's very clear they're just trying to get away from team lead's attempts at chumming with them. Around 10, we have a stand-up and he talks about how great it was to have everyone at the thing. Then he singles me out, talks about how antisocial I am and how management notices when people are not team players. Don't skip required events. Okay, dude. Well, about 20 minutes later, I emailed the entire team. Hey all, team member asked me about required after-work events that are unpaid, so I figured I would share with everyone. The state statute XYZ says that for hourly employees like us that we cannot be required to go to these sorts of things without being on the clock. So if you cannot find a babysitter and cannot make it, you don't need to worry at all. Totally friendly, totally non-confrontational, and totally effective. Team lead sat by himself at the bar for the next 2 required but not required happy hours and had to find another way to force people to like him. And yeah guys, I gotta say, having a job like that would be an absolute nightmare for me because there's no way in hell I would want to spend time with my boss after work is already done. Have you ever had a job like that? Let me know in the comments. And by the way, while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video because that would help me tremendously. Also let me know where you are watching from today. Either way, the next one is a fantastic Prorevenge story and it starts like this. So this happened many years ago and I'm obviously changing some details because I'm not looking to get sued. For context, I work in IT, not the cool startup kind. Think forklifts, warehouses, dusty servers in a back room, and a logistics company that grew faster than anyone ever planned for. When I started, the IT department was basically me, an old tower PC in a closet and a label maker. Also, I happened to be in a wheelchair. Spinal cord injury from before I ever joined the company. It's not a big tragic backstory for this post, it is important only because of how my new boss decided to weaponize it against me. Either way, when I got hired, the company was still family owned. It was scrappy, chaotic, and everyone did a bit of everything. They took a chance on me when some other places clearly didn't want to deal with ramps, elevators, and accommodations. The old owner did not make a big deal about it either. He just asked, "Can you do the job?" And when I said yes, that was that. Over the next couple decades, I built out pretty much everything that made the place run on the tech side. Inventory system? I helped design it. Warehouse scanners? I set up the backend. Driver scheduling tool? I duct taped 3 different systems together to make it work. Every ugly workaround, every temporary solution that somehow stayed in production forever, I knew where the bodies were buried. It was not glamorous, but it was stable at least. People stayed for years. The warehouse manager had been there longer than me, the head accountant could close the books in her sleep, operations had a guy who knew the roadmap so well he could look at a list of addresses and tell you which trucks would end up late, then the private equity people showed up. Exciting new chapter was the phrase they kept using. That is how you know you're screwed. Soon, the old owner retired, sold the company to a big investment group, and suddenly we had brand synergy meetings and transformation roadmaps. There were glossy slide decks about leveraging technology to unlock efficiencies. The suits were everywhere for a while, and then they disappeared again, leaving behind a pile of initiatives and one very important change. A new director of business transformation and IT. My new boss. I will just call her Karen because honestly it fits too well. Karen came in like she was staging a corporate reality show, always on like she thought a camera crew might pop out of a broom closet at any second. The first time we met, she walked into the server room, my little cave that I'd been fighting to keep cool and semi-organized for years, looked around for maybe 5 seconds and said, "Wow, this is vintage." I said something like, "Yeah, most of it works, some of it needs replacing," but she cut me off with a smile that didn't even reach her eyes. "Don't worry, we're gonna drag this place into the modern era. You've been here a long time, right?" "Yeah, a while." "Perfect. I will need your help mapping all this legacy stuff so we can figure out what to shut down first." That was the first red flag, not what to improve, what to shut down. Over the next few weeks I saw how she worked. Or more accurately, how she talked about working. She loved buzzwords like everything was agile and scalable, cloud first. She would stand in front of a whiteboard, draw boxes and arrows and act like she had just invented logistics. Meanwhile, if you asked her which server actually handled inventory transactions, she would go quiet and say something like, "That's a technical detail. We will standardize that later." She also had a particular tone with me. A few examples: anytime I had to wheel down the main hallway and people had to move a cart or a box an inch to the side so I could pass, she would make comments like, "We really need to redesign this layout. It slows everything down." If I arrived at a meeting a couple minutes late because someone had parked a pallet in front of the only accessible route, she would say in front of everyone, "We need to work on punctuality, especially in IT." Time is money. She once pulled me aside to check in on how I was coping with the pace of change, and then followed it up with, "Maybe we can find you a role that doesn't involve so much moving around the building, huh?" As if my legs were the bottleneck in our network. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. People say dumb stuff, you correct them once, maybe twice, and hope they learn. I pointed out gently that it was not me slowing anything down, it was the layout, the lack of clear paths, the fact that nobody enforced rules about blocking hallways. I even gave her a written list of simple changes that would make the building more accessible and more efficient for everyone. That list went nowhere, but the comments didn't stop. At the same time, she started dismantling the culture that had kept the place running. The senior warehouse manager got told his informal processes were not acceptable anymore and that he needed to run everything past a new operations coordinator fresh out of school who had never been inside a warehouse before. The accountant got told that she would have to justify every expense over a small amount to some finance person at the parent company who had never set foot in our office. Operations had to start using a new dashboard Karen liked because it looked good in presentations, even though it didn't show half the useful info the old reports did. Then she turned more directly towards IT. We had a meeting where she laid out her big plan. "We are gonna move everything to the cloud," she said, pacing at the front of the conference room like a TED Talk knockoff. "No more clunky on-premise servers. We are gonna outsource the basic support to a partner that can do it cheaper and at scale. Internally, we will keep only strategic roles. We need agility. We need speed." I asked, "Have you looked at the warehouse side connectivity? The scanners drop even on a good day. If the main system is not local, we're gonna have outages every time the internet hiccups." She smiled like you would smile at a child who didn't understand how microwaves work. "That is a negative mindset," she said. "Modern systems are resilient, we just need the right partner." Translation: she had already promised this to the parent company, and any concerns were just negativity in her eyes. A few days after that, she sent me a performance expectation document. It read like a template she had filled my name into. I had to demonstrate agility, improve pace of work, align with transformation goals, and all the usual vague nonsense. No specific metrics, no timeline, just a soft threat wrapped in corporate language. I knew exactly what it was, a paper trail. Around that time she started nitpicking everything I did. A server patch that needed extra testing? "Why is this taking so long?" I would explain that if we rushed it and something broke, the warehouse would grind to a halt. She would say, "You're using that as an excuse. Our partner says they can do this kind of patching overnight." The partner she kept referring to was some managed service company she wanted to bring in, and I'd looked them up. They were cheap and their reviews were not great. Meanwhile, she would make comments about my wheelchair that were less and less subtle, joking about traffic jams when I was in a corridor, saying things like, "If we had a more mobile team, we could do more walking stand-ups around the building." And once she actually said, "We need faster movement and faster thinking." It was obvious what she meant by it. She never said the actual words, "You're disabled, so you're slow," but she didn't have to. And yeah, everyone in earshot got the message. I started documenting everything, emails, notes after conversations, dates, times, who else was there. I forwarded the emails to my personal account. I wasn't sure yet what I would need it for, but I knew better than to trust corporate HR under private equity. However, the final straw started with a calendar invite. "Check in on performance." Subject line, just me and her in a small conference room. She had a printed form in front of her and that "I've already made my decision" look on her face. She started with fake concern. "I've noticed some resistance to change," she said. "You seem very attached to the way things have always been done." I told her I was not attached to anything for emotional reasons. I was just attached to things that worked. I didn't care if I sat in the cloud or under my desk as long as the trucks rolled out on time and the warehouse workers got correct picked lists. She then said, "That's exactly what I mean. You're not embracing the new direction, and honestly, your pace is not where it needs to be. The leadership team needs agility." I pointed out that my tickets were up to date, uptime was solid, and the only major issues we had had lately were from the half-baked tools she had forced on operations. She flipped to her form and made a note. "So you're not willing to accept this feedback, huh?" I could see where this was going. I didn't blow up though. I just asked one question. What would success look like to you specifically? What do you want me to do differently that's measurable? She didn't have a real answer. She just repeated phrases from the form. "Faster, more flexible, less resistance." I went home that night and told my wife. "I think she's trying to push me out." My wife said, "On what grounds? You've never even been written up." I said, "They don't need real grounds. They just need enough paperwork that HR won't argue." I toyed with the idea of going to HR first with the disability comments and the vague performance stuff, but HR now reported straight to the parent company, and the head of HR had been attached to Karen's hip lately, so I had no reason to believe that they'd be on my side. So I did what I do best. I observed, I documented, and I prepared. Fast forward to Thanksgiving, our company always sends out a generic "thank you for your hard work" email around the holidays. The old owner used to actually write something personal. The new owner sent something that clearly came from a marketing department. Whatever though, it was still a day off and I was at a relative's place, sitting in a crowded living room that smelled like food, half watching some game I didn't care about, but then my phone buzzed. I glanced down expecting some family group chat nonsense, but it was a text from Karen. No, "Hey, can we talk next week?" No warning, just a cold block of text. "Effective immediately, your position has been eliminated as part of our transformation efforts. Your final paycheck and a severance payment of $500 will be processed next week. Please return your badge, laptop, and any company property by Monday. We appreciate your contributions and wish you all the best in your future endeavors." I read it twice, handed the phone to my wife without saying anything, and she read it, looked at me, and just said, "You've got to be kidding." $500 for 2 decades fired by SMS on Thanksgiving. A few minutes later, an email from HR landed in my inbox. The same wording, just more formal this time. Attached was some generic severance agreement. No extra weeks of pay, no explanation, just a "position eliminated." I went outside for air because I felt like someone had punched me. The first wave was shock, then embarrassment, and then a hot white anger I hadn't felt in a long time. You tell yourself these companies care, you tell yourself that loyalty matters. I knew better, logically, but there's still a part of you that thinks they will at least treat me with basic decency, right? But instead I got $500 and a canned paragraph. I opened the email again and noticed something. The so-called effective immediately part. I knew how our offboarding process worked because I built the damn checklist, and there was a whole section about disabling accounts, revoking access, removing admin permissions. It was supposed to be triggered by HR sending a ticket to IT. IT as in me. And guess who nobody had looped in yet? On habit, I opened the VPN app on my phone and logged into the company servers. Connected, no problem. I tried the remote management tool then. I was still in. I sent a test command to one of the inventory servers. It worked like always. They had fired their main systems administrator over text on a holiday and had not, in all their infinite wisdom, thought to cut off his access first. I sat there, staring at the screen, thinking about all the leadership speeches I'd heard over the years and all the "we are a family" talk. All the times I had stayed late to keep something running because drivers needed their routes and staff needed their paychecks, but then I thought about Karen asking in a meeting whether my wheelchair slowed down the office flow. I thought about her telling me that my pace was not good enough, about the more mobile team comment, and about the performance plan with no real metrics, about the timing of this little text stunt, and yeah, I thought about that $500. It was not the amount itself though. I mean, I'm not stupid, I know companies don't usually give out golden parachutes to regular employees, but it was the message: you're worth less than a new laptop. It took me a couple days to cool down enough to think clearly. I didn't touch the systems that first night, I just sat with that anger and talked things through with my wife. She said, if you decide to sue, we have those emails. The stuff she said about you slowing things down because of your chair, that's not okay. I said, yeah, I'm just gonna talk to a lawyer, but I also have options I'm not proud of. She knew what that meant, she knows what I do, her only condition was simple. Whatever you do, don't get yourself thrown in jail. They are not worth that. So I slept on it on and off for a couple nights, and in the end what pushed me over the edge was not just what happened to me. It was what she had been doing to everyone else. Over the next week I called a few people from work, the warehouse manager, the accountant, operations, one of the other IT guys. I was not asking them to do anything illegal, I was just checking in, letting them know I'd been eliminated and listening. Everyone had a story. The warehouse manager had been told his role might not exist in the new structure and he should start documenting for transition. The accountant had been told her job was on the chopping block because the parent company wanted to centralize finance. Operations had a new middle manager who overrode every decision and then blamed them when things went wrong. One of the IT guys said, "She asked me how long it would take to get some offshore guys up to speed on the systems. She thinks I can compress 10 years experience into 3 Zoom calls." The common thread was clear. Anyone who actually knew how things worked was being treated like deadweight. I didn't tell them what I was thinking right away though. I just said something like, if you're looking around, you wouldn't be the only one, and left it at that. Meanwhile, I poked around the systems. I need to be very clear here, what I did was not legal. I'm not trying to justify it or encourage anyone to copy it. I'm just telling you what happened. I also didn't just sit there typing delete everything. That's not how real systems work, and it would have been too obvious anyway. Instead, I leaned on what made me valuable in the first place. I knew where they were fragile. For example, we had a backup system that had been limping along for years. It worked, but only because I babysat it, adjusted schedule when loads got too high, and tested restores regularly, even though when nobody asked me to. I knew which backups were mission critical, which ones were just nice to have, and which ones were mostly there to make auditors feel better. The new partner Karen wanted to bring in had already asked for documentation on backup status. I'd written a pretty detailed overview for them, but I'd kept it generic because I didn't fully trust them. With my still active admin access, I made some changes. I won't go into deep technical detail because again, not here to give a how-to, but the gist is I adjusted some scripts so that they would report successful completion without actually backing up certain key databases properly. I set a few retention periods in ways that looked reasonable on the dashboard, but would quietly age out the most recent good snapshots faster than normal. I also cleaned up some old documentation inside the internal knowledge base. Nothing obviously malicious, just some small edits that would send someone in the wrong direction if they were trying to fix a big outage under pressure. On their own, these changes wouldn't do much itself. As long as someone who actually knew the environment was around, they would see the weirdness and just fix it. So that was part 1, but part 2 was people. I reached out again to these long-term co-workers and had more honest conversations. No technical talk, no mention of systems, just reality. Look, I said to the warehouse manager on the phone, they fired me by text on Thanksgiving, gave me $500 and told me to drop my badge off like a pizza box. Do you really think they're gonna treat you any better when they are done squeezing what they want out of you? He was quiet for a long time and then he said, I've got an offer from a competitor. I was gonna wait and see, but yeah, screw this. The accountant had been quietly looking too. She was terrified of leaving because she had never worked anywhere else as an adult, but she had also been told that her role might move to another city and she had family that she couldn't move away from. We talked it through. I told her what happened to me. I told her I would back her up as a reference anywhere she applied. I told her that if they were already making her train some central finance resource, that was a bad sign. She called me a week later and said she had accepted a job with a smaller company across town. Better hours, less pay at first, but more stability. One of the operations guys had been venting to me for months about the new dashboards and unrealistic targets. I said, if you're serious about leaving, now is the time. They're about to do something really dumb with the systems. Being tied to that ship when it goes under is not gonna help your resume. So yeah, over the next month or so, 5 people put in their notice or accepted offers elsewhere: the warehouse manager, the head accountant, the operations lead, and 2 experienced IT staffers who knew parts of the environment even I didn't fully own. Some of them gave the standard 2 weeks. Some used up their remaining vacation, so their actual working days were even fewer. None of them was replaced before they walked out the door. Karen's big transformation timeline could not be moved because she had already promised results to the parent company. She kept charging ahead with her cloud migration partner. The plan, as she bragged about it in a meeting before I was canned, was to move our core systems off the local servers and into a fancy hosted environment in a single big bang cutover. If you've ever worked in IT, you're probably cringing just reading that. Normally, if I was still there, I would be the one throwing my body in front of that train. I would insist on parallel runs, fallback plans, incremental moves. I would test backup restores exhaustively before we touched anything. I would fight to keep certain function on site until we were sure the connections were rock solid, but now I watched from my couch. My access lingered for surprisingly long. They must have assumed that HR had just handled it. HR assumed someone on IT did, and the remaining IT staff was too swamped with the migration prep to double check. Eventually my VPN got cut off, but by then I had done what I was gonna do. And then the fun started. The cutover was scheduled for right before one of their busiest periods. The logic was that they would get efficiency gains right when order volume bumped up, which would look great on a report. Also, the parent company wanted numbers by a certain quarter. From what my coworkers told me afterwards, it was chaos. They did the switch. At first, things looked okay. The new dashboard came up, users could log in, everyone patted themselves on the back, but then the edges started to crumble. Warehouse scanners began dropping connections randomly. Orders would appear twice in one system and not at all in another. The inventory counts would change unexpectedly because some old process hadn't been fully turned off and was still touching the database. Because the migration partner didn't fully understand our mess of a temporary scripts and weird integrations, they missed a bunch of things that used to happen behind the scenes. Those things didn't make it into their tidy diagram. Drivers showed up for their shifts and did not have routes printed. The scheduling tool relied on a job that never got configured in the new environment. People scrambled. They called the partner. The partner looked at their clean servers and said, "Everything is fine on our end, must be your network." Staff on the ground called the remaining IT guys, but the remaining IT guys were drowning. And then someone said, "Okay, let's roll back. Restore from last week's backup." Well, you can probably see where this is going. Those backups, the ones that had been quietly misconfigured to look successful, the ones with adjusted retention, they got a nasty surprise. A few restores worked but were so old that using them would have meant losing weeks of transactions. Every minute they spent trying to untangle that, trucks sat idle, warehouse workers stood around waiting for instructions, and customers' orders were not shipping. Big customers don't like hearing, "Our system is down," during peak seasons. Some shipments still went out, but with wrong contents or quantities. Returns piled up, angry emails flowed in. One big retail client apparently called and said, "If you don't get your act together, we are suspending all orders." On top of that, payroll got hit. The accountant had left. The person she trained hadn't been given full access yet because the parent company wanted tighter control. Combine that with broken systems and people not being able to clock in correctly, and suddenly paychecks were delayed and wrong. Nothing will tank morale faster than people not getting paid correctly. From the outside, I watched some of this play out on social media and review sites. Drivers and warehouse staff were complaining in vague posts about idiot management and systems that don't work. One of the warehouse guys texted me, "Man, you picked the right time to get out." Internally, from what I was told later, it was even uglier. The parent company flew in a couple of their own IT people and some executive types. Emergency meetings all day. Karen was apparently in full spin mode. She tried to blame technical debt left by the old team. She tried to blame the managed service partner, and she even tried to push suspicion towards me. At one point, according to a friend who was in the room, she said something like, "We cannot rule out sabotage from disgruntled former staff. The previous administrator was terminated recently." One of the executives asked, "Do we have any evidence of that?" They didn't though, because there wasn't anything clean they could point to. The logs mostly showed processes starting and stopping like normal. The configuration changes I had made looked like someone tweaking schedules and settings over time. You could not line it up with a single dramatic event. The more realistic explanation, and the one that made it into their internal reports, was that they had done an aggressive migration without proper understanding, without enough overlap, and without adequate testing. In other words, bad planning and worse management. And who had owned that plan? Of course, it was Karen. The managed service partner covered their own backside. They pointed to emails where they had asked for more time, more documentation, more test cycles, and had been told to push ahead. The remaining IT staff covered themselves too. They had ticket history showing they had raised concerns about timing and risk, only to then be brushed off. The warehouse team and operations had emails where they had asked to delay the switch until after the busy period and been told no. Every thread you pulled led back to the same person. While all this was going on, I had my own thing in motion too. As soon as I cooled down after the firing, I had talked to a lawyer about the disability angle. I showed them the emails I had saved, the ones where she said I slowed down the office, where she suggested I might do better in a less mobile role, where she tied my pace to my future at the company, and I told them about the performance plan with no real goals. I told them about the firing via text, the $500, and the fact that I was the only visibly disabled person in the department. The lawyer was very clear. Discrimination cases are not slam dunks. But they also said companies really don't like it when you have clear written comments tying disability to performance and then a sudden termination. They drafted a letter to the company's legal department. It was polite but firm. It laid out the timeline, the comments about my wheelchair, the lack of meaningful severance, the humiliating way they had done it. It didn't make wild demands, but it made it clear that we were prepared to file a formal complaint if they didn't make it right. I sent that off right around the time their systems were on fire. I didn't plan the timing that way on purpose. I didn't know exactly when their cutover would crash and burn, but I cannot pretend that I felt bad when my lawyer called and said they responded very quickly, which usually means they are scared of something. According to my lawyer, their reply was telling. They didn't admit any wrongdoing, of course they didn't, but they were suddenly very open to resolving this amicably. They offered a much larger settlement than $500. We are talking enough to cover several months of living expenses and then some, and they also offered to mark my termination as a position eliminated due to restructuring in their records with a neutral reference. In return, I had to agree to keep the terms confidential and not file anything formal. My lawyer laid out the options: fight it out for potential more, or take the decent offer and move on, and I thought about it. A part of me wanted them dragged publicly. I wanted my day in court where I could talk about her comments and the text on Thanksgiving and everything else, and then I thought about the stress, the time, and the fact that they were already getting dragged internally or anyway. The system's mess was costing them way more than anything they were gonna pay me. So I took the deal. I'm not stupid. Revenge feels good, but you cannot pay your bills with it. I signed, they paid, and I walked away. Back at the company, things kept sliding downhill. They limped through the busy season, but lost a big client who had enough of missing and wrong shipments. Word spread in the industry: don't trust them right now, their systems are a mess. More staff quit. The managed service partner jacked up their rates because suddenly everything was out of scope, emergency work. The parent company eventually did what parent companies always do when a play doesn't work out: they looked for a scapegoat. Karen was asked to leave, and I heard that through the grapevine a couple months after my settlement. It was not some huge public firing, no dramatic walk of shame, just your standard executive exit, a bland announcement about pursuing other opportunities, and then her badge stopped working. Still, I can't lie, when I saw a former coworker text me, "Guess who's gone?" I smiled like an idiot. From what people told me later, the company never really recovered. They shut down one of the regional warehouses, they sold off a few assets, and eventually they got absorbed by another logistics company. The old name and logo disappeared from trucks and warehouses. The buildings I spent 20 years keeping online now have someone else's logo on them. As for me, I took some time off, and between my savings, my wife's income, and the settlement, we were okay. I updated my resume and started applying around. I was honest about what happened, minus the part about me helping light the match. I framed it as, company got bought, new management pushed out old staff. I was part of a restructuring. It took a bit, but I landed at a smaller company that actually seemed to mean it when they said they cared about people. Remote work was normal there, which meant no hallways for anyone to complain about, and the person interviewing me actually asked about my experience instead of my wheelchair. I set some firm boundaries for myself at the new place. I documented everything in ways other people could understand. I refused to be the only one who knew how critical jobs worked. I made sure there were clear offboarding steps that didn't depend on just one person. I never wanted to be in a position again where I was the glue holding everything together, and leadership just saw me as another box on a chart. And the next one is an awesome petty revenge story that is titled, I Hope You Like Stickers. So my first car was a Chevy Aveo, a little put-put car that I could fill up for maybe 20 bucks, and I beat that car into the ground because I bought it brand new and fully paid off. At the end of its life, it was missing door handles, the gas door cover, you name it. A few days before I was gonna sell it to one of those cash-for-car dealers, I happened to get in a little scuttle with a woman in a parking lot because she parked so close to my passenger side door that she dented it when she got out, and got her red paint on the side mirror she also cracked. She was very heavy set, so I know she was leaning into her door when she got out, hence the damage. I was literally sitting in the car as she did it. At first I was polite and said something like, "Ma'am, you just dented my car with your door. We should exchange insurance, please." And she just kept walking away like she did nothing, kept ignoring me, calling her out as she waddled away, and I know that she was ignoring me because she kept looking back at me and waving me off. Well, that didn't fly with me, so I followed her in the store ready for a showdown, but instead I found one of those sticker machines for like 50 cents with the ugliest stickers you can imagine. I bought a bunch and just went down to town, sticking them all over her car, the windshield and especially her driver's side door, moved my car over about 3 rows, and parked between some other cars because I wanted to see her face when she saw the stickers. I was probably waiting like half an hour, but it was worth it. She was cussing and throwing the biggest hissy fit of her life as she walked around her car, finding sticker after sticker. I don't care if my car looked beat up, it's not an invitation to damage it further and not take accountability for it. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist on the left, which has thousands of videos. Otherwise, I will see you again tomorrow.